Welcome to The Pulse, where we cover gaming news, updates, and new game releases. In this episode, we've decided to switch it up a little bit. We've broken down the video into new segments that better guide you through the pulse. We'll start off with a shuffle and deal segment where we break down studio closures, layoffs, and brand spanking new studios. After that, we'll hop over to some of the legal happenings in the industry with the Gaming Sidebar. After the sidebar, we'll go directly into the global checkpoint, which is where we'll cover some of the global headlines that you should know. Once we hit all of the global checkpoints, we'll finish up the news with quick updates on the latest games and information. That'll be called the Game State Update. Sorry about the lengthy introduction. Today's episode is jam-packed as always. We have lots to cover, so let's jump straight into the shuffle and deal. A few weeks ago, we spoke about Concord and the absolute failure that Sony delivered. On the 29th, Sony released an official statement via an internal memo sent to employees that they'll be closing down Firewalk Studios, the studio behind said failure. It's crazy timing for this announcement because over the course of the previous week, there were some big rumors that Concord was still being worked on, and updates were being pushed out. Oh, and there was a little bit about resellers snatching up the copies of the game and, selling it. Well, that's all just a time suck now since Sony is officially pulling the plug on not only the game, but the studio as well. In that same internal memo, Sony also states that their mobile game studio, Neon Koi, will also be shut down. The game or games that they were working on will be stopped immediately. Of course, there's no number as to how many people are affected, so we did some digging around. So we found some information from gamesindustry.biz, and it looks like Neon Koi has about 11 to 50 employees, and Firewalk has around 50 to 200 employees. Those are obviously rough numbers, so take it for what it's worth. So staying on the topic of PlayStation, because PlayStation seems to have a lot of news lately, Bungie's creative team has jumped to Sony Studios to support PlayStation's live service games. PlayStation needs this since they've been pumping millions of dollars into complete failures. Don't get me wrong though, Helldivers 2 is a banger, no doubt, but Sony can't afford another Concord failure, and that's a simple fact. Basically, Bridget O'Neill, who's Bungie's former creative director, announced on LinkedIn that the current Bungie team will build the foundation for a creative team within PlayStation. She's fully embracing the opportunity to share Bungie's experience in live service games and working on not only PlayStation titles, but Bungie titles as well. Now, Bungie's been in the news a lot recently, so here's a short recap. Bungie's laid off 220 devs and reshuffled around 155 people into SIE. There was also 75 people who started a new studio under PlayStation Studios to work on another Bungie project. And now, we add on the creative team being shuffled into SIE. We'll see what becomes of Bungie in the future. As of right now, it's not looking good at all. Alright, let's keep this moving with a couple of studio shutdowns. The first shutdown that we're going to talk about is indie studio Thunderhorse. Thunderhorse was based in California, and from what I thought, they were an indie dev that was going to stick around a little bit longer. They said a number of challenges and development hurdles is what's causing the shutdown. Over the course of 9 years, they've released 3 games, the first one being Samurai Blitz, and the second being Raccoon Rascals. Their larger title, Flynn Son of Crimson, was released back in 2021 and published under Humble Games. I thought Flynn was doing really well, and seeing this news was actually stupid surprising. As for currently, they had a game called Ronin Rush in development, but now that's no longer happening, and this might be the reason behind the closure. Next on this list is Inflexion Games. Now the studio as a whole isn't closing down, but their UK branch is. Details are very limited, but from what we gathered on LinkedIn, John Newman, the audio director, confirms the details. This will be a reduction in the audio team in charge of Nightingale. Now I wish that was the end of the announcement, but there's a bit more to this. Followed by the UK closure, Inflexion has made a statement to gamesindustry.biz about internal restructuring. Inflexion has made the decision of restructuring their business by letting go of 22 individuals. Their approach through this process centered around compassion, respect, and care. Compassion, respect, and care. They're helping them navigate the situation by finding new opportunities and support where needed. So I'm going to pause right here real quick and kind of explain to you why I just repeated compassion, respect, and care. Some studios that show just a little bit more compassion towards their employees that are getting let go goes a really long way. It's crazy how companies can talk about more profits and losing deals and showing no level of empathy at all towards the human being that's been hugely impacted. And a little bit of compassion and respect and care usually goes a long way, and it makes the whole thing a little bit better, a little easier to go through. Now, I've mentioned in previous pulses that there were about 13,000 people who've been let go, and that was as of, I think, 2 pulses ago. So, that it's very tough right now when developers aren't able to find a job or anything else like that. And if there's a company out there that's willing to actually share some of that burden by just helping them look for another job or another position, by vouching for these people, if they were good employees and workers, everyone's going to say, well, they can find a job easily. Well, it's not that hard, it's not that easy when there's 13,000 other people looking for the same job. So, when companies can say, hey, there's a little compassion here. You have my respect. Let me help you out here. Sorry for the little rant. So jumping right into another closure, back on October 21st, GameFiles broke the news that one of Netflix's game studios has been closed down. The SoCal-based studio, aka Team Blue, looks stupid promising. With talk of the huge AAA multi-platform title in the works, there was news that they had picked up Chaco Sonny, the former Overwatch executive producer, and they also got Joseph Staten, the creative director writer from Bungie, 343, and Microsoft. It's crazy. It's a bummer to learn that the studio is closing before debuting a game, but like I mentioned before, there are many other gaming studios on Big Red's list, and I guess they'll take priority now. South Korean developer and publisher NCSoft announces that they'll be downsizing. From what NCSoft says, their process will involve reassigning some internal members and starting a voluntary retirement program. As part of this restructuring, NCSoft is also creating 4 new wholly owned subsidiaries. These subsidiaries will be in place by February 1st, 2025. The breakdown of the studios is pretty simple. There's going to be 3 studios that'll be in charge of either game development, or they're going to be in charge of another project, or they're going to be in charge of AI. So this is how it breaks down. Now I'm going to warn you, XYZ is not what the studio's final name is going to be. They're just kind of placeholders, and that's pretty much how NCSoft has stated it. So for Studio X, they'll be in charge of Throne and Liberty development, purely on developing Throne and Liberty, all of the content, DLC, and all that other stuff that's supposed to come for the game. That's what they'll be in charge of. Now, Studio Y will be in charge of Project Triple L, LLL, whatever you want to call it. That's what Studio Y is going to be in charge of. Now, Studio Z is going to be in charge of Tecton, another project, I believe. Don't really know too much about that one, but that's what Studio Z is going to be in charge of. Now, there's a 4th studio that's going to be kind of spun up just to focus on their AI department. The company itself is going to be spun off of their NC Research division, and that's going to be in charge of specializing in AI and NCSoft's proprietary AI technology. All right, let's move on to one of the bigger news topics in the episode of The Pulse. We're going to be talking about Ubisoft. Yet again, I seriously think Ubisoft is at a tipping point. So the topic today is one of the divisions within Ubisoft Montpellier is disbanding. So you might be asking, so what division is it? Well, it's the team behind the Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. Well, it looks like the team had pitched a new sequel to the game, but ultimately senior leadership denied it, saying that The Lost Crown didn't sell well enough to warrant a sequel. Based on the gamers reporting, The Lost Crown didn't meet Ubisoft's expectations. There weren't any official numbers thrown around, but based on Insider Gaming's report back in January, the game had sold 300,000 copies in the first 2 weeks on the market. Now let's pivot from the negative news and let's see what Ubisoft has as far as good news. I mean, I don't know if it's really super great news, but it's something that'll hopefully lead to some great news in the future. So it looks like Fawzi Mesmar has joined Ubisoft Montpellier as the creative director of Beyond Good and Evil 2, taking the place of Emile Morel, who unfortunately passed away last year. This is some good news only because Mesmar is a veteran designer with a deep background in game design. His previous stints include working at DICE, King, and Gameloft. He's been part of Ubisoft for about 3 years now, and he's been working on some pretty big titles himself. So things like Mario and Rabbids, Sparks of Hope, Star Wars Outlaws, and he did the 20th anniversary for Beyond Good and Evil. So I think he's probably one of the best candidates to actually take over this project. So with that news coming out, There isn't much information as to the status of the game. I mean, you would expect 16 years, new creative director, there might be some good news coming out saying, hey, look, this is our roadmap as to when we might have the game ready. It's just all hopes and dreams at this point. We're just hoping that this is going to create more traction. So another little side note, Beyond Good and Evil is now the longest game to ever be in development, at 16 years. The previous title to take that award was Duke Nukem Forever, which was at 15 years. So you can imagine that a lot of Beyond Good and Evil fans have been waiting a very long time, and this is some news that might be able to kind of reignite that flame for the game. Next up is Surgent Studios. So Surgent Studios has put its entire games division on hiatus. And the reason behind it is because they're struggling to secure funding. Even after decent reviews for their game, Tales of Kenzera, and being part of the EA Originals label, the game has struggled commercially. Now, if you remember, back in June, Surgent Studios actually announced that they were letting go of 13 people. That was 3 months after the game had originally launched. So now we know that Surgent Studios is now in a funding limbo type deal. There was an announcement that was made that confirmed their new Project Urso. It's still in production, and it's still looking for an active partner to bring it to life. We're hoping that they actually find a partner and a new funding source so they can keep the studio alive. A new studio might actually be unionizing very soon. The studio in question is 2K Motion Capture Studio. It's been confirmed with GamesIndustry.biz that IATSE may represent certain employees at their California-based studio. The spokesperson for 2K Motion Capture Studio did acknowledge that there were challenges and that there was discussions happening between management and employees, and they encourage that the dialogue stays open and free so people can understand what the problems are within the studio. There's hope that the company can actually sort this out on their own, but the option of a union stepping in and representing a couple of employees may be an option. So here's another big news headline. QA workers from Activision Blizzard's Minnesota department have walked out in protest against new RTO mandates. As reported earlier by Eurogamer, the CWA is backing the Activision Workers Group, aka A Better ABK, in getting answers to the latest RTO mandate. The biggest issue here is that there is no accommodation for those people who have serious medical conditions that can't return back to the office. So for those of you who aren't familiar, in the US, we have a set of rules or acts that protect Americans with disabilities. This is called the ADA. Within the act, there are laws for businesses to accommodate individuals with medical conditions. The law covers many things like physical impairments, mental impairments, and other conditions like cancer, diabetes, and things like that. So now that you know what the ADA is, the huge issue here is that regardless of ADA-certified medical conditions, Activision and Microsoft are insisting workers need to come back to the office. So the employees first started asking questions like, hey, what if we have a medical condition? Do we still need to come in? What's the rules around that? The CWA has actually reached out to both companies, and from their reporting, they're literally getting nothing. They're just getting walked in circles, either getting ignored or they're not getting a definitive reason. What this actually sounds like is one of those RTO ploys where the company demands and mandates that you show up or you get asked to kick rocks. If that's the case, I'm sure we're going to be reporting on more of this in the future. And out of curiosity, is your job mandating some form of RTO or a hybrid system, maybe 3 days a week or every day? Let us know in the comments. All right, this next one's going to be a little bit longer than usual. And I'm going to start this off with I don't know how to say this company's name. I don't know if it's Fntastic or Fntastic. I like Fntastic, so we're going to use Fntastic. So the news with Fntastic is that they've canceled their failing Kickstarter game. And in that same announcement, they're announcing a new game. You guys probably don't remember Fntastic. They're the studio that released the day before back in 2023, then shut down 4 days later. And then fast forward a couple of months later, and in September, they started another Kickstarter campaign for a game called Escape Factory. Ring any bells? It's okay if you don't remember. Well, they actually canceled that Kickstarter campaign with only raising about $3,000. Their statement reads, "After careful analysis and discussion with the team, we have decided that our Escape Factory project has not generated enough interest. The Kickstarter reached the 15.73% mark after 4 weeks. With this in mind, we have decided to temporarily suspend work on Escape Factory and postpone it until a more appropriate time." In that same exact statement, they announced a few things that they're working on. One of the bigger things, a shooter, a prop hunt-esque type game, is in the works. All right, and this is when you actually get your salt shaker ready because they're touting the same dream-fulfilling nonsense that they pushed with their previous games, and it's just not boding well at all. Anyways, they may go the route of actually crowdfunding the new game. At this point, I think the industry has written them off until they can prove that they aren't just a quick cash grab walking train wreck of a studio. IGN had originally did the interview back in 2023 with Fntastic. I'll post the link to that interview below. A Latin American studio called 3OGs has recently been acquired by OV Entertainment, and they changed their name to reflect the new beginnings. So, 3OGs will now be known as the OGs, which sticks to their roots while also laying down their path of evolution. It's pretty awesome to see studios moving up, and we're excited to see what they come out with. And there's even more news of studios expanding and growing. Sneakybox, the porting and game development studio that focuses on porting and remastering games, they've just announced that they're expanding into Poland. This is great news for those out in Poland. Sneakybox is actually actively looking for local talent. Their goal with this expansion is to grow their international team and embrace new and unique perspectives. I've posted more information in the description below, so go check that out. And last but not least, for the Shuffle and Deal, we have a new studio being born. This new studio is called AntiHero Studios. AntiHero Studios was created by former Supercell creative director Bryce LaVille St. Martin, Frank Yan, who was the former Brawl Stars senior game designer, and former King technical director Andre Parody. The studio's main focus will primarily be on multiplayer games, or as their motto states, games worth sharing. MobileGamer.biz has reported that the studio is already receiving funding through the Finnish government as part of the Finland for Game Devs initiative. We'll actually be talking about a couple of initiatives that other countries are doing for gamers and game devs, so stick around for that. All right, and that's going to wrap up the Shuffle and Deal segment. Check out rngproject.com for more news like this. Next up, the Gaming Sidebar. All right, so we're going to start the Gaming Sidebar with a lawsuit that's happening between Sega and the developers behind Memento Mori. Sega has filed a lawsuit against Japanese developer Bank of Innovation, or BOI. So it looks like Sega and BOI were in talks prior to the lawsuit, and they were trying to discuss the best way to settle what Sega thought was a clear patent infringement. They went back and forth, and discussions were starting to look like they were going to go through, and then they broke down, which prompted Sega to actually submit a lawsuit. So what's Sega's goal in this? Well, they're looking at a 1 billion yen to cover damages, and they also want BOI to stop infringing the patent. Now, we have to kind of explain what the patent is that BOA is infringing on so you can understand. It's one of Sega's patented systems for fusing character cards of the same kind in collection games. Now, I didn't know that there's a way a character card is fused with something that you could patent, but I guess you can patent anything nowadays. And yeah, you learn something new every day. Now, unfortunately, if this lawsuit goes in favor of Sega, it'll significantly damage BOI. More updates as they become available. And next, we've got Sony. Oh, Sony. This time, Sony's actually losing a lawsuit that looks like that's been going on for almost 12 years. So the original lawsuit goes way back in 2012 when Sony sued German company Datel. What was it over? Action Replay for the PSP. So Action Replay was basically a cheat where it would manipulate the game for the user's benefit. The example used was MotorStorm Arctic Edge, and Action Replay would allow for infinite boosts. Now, this lawsuit was filed at the German federal court, and they saw that the software didn't change or reproduce the source code, object code, or internal structure of Sony's games. Once that verdict was handed down, Sony was like, nah, I don't like that answer at all. So they kept pushing Datel to stop marketing Action Replay, and they wanted compensation for the alleged loss in profits. At the end of the day, the European Court of Justice, who Sony originally went through to get protection of any alterations or anything else like that to their games, they were just like, dude, my hands are tied. The German court already had their ruling, and I agree with them. Datel didn't alter any source code. And at that point, since the decision was made, the German law basically states that you have to close the case. There's nothing else to deliberate on. And I'm sure at this point, Sony's probably not happy with that ruling, but I mean, it is what it is at the end of the day. Today, it's crazy because cheats have become so sophisticated. They target software code at the fundamental levels. So it's kind of great that courts are now able to take action against cheat providers. Think of Bungie versus Aim Junkies and that $4.3 million lawsuit. If you haven't heard, TLDR, Bungie won. And that wraps up our quick sidebar. Next up is our global checkpoint. Alright, we're going to start off with Malaysia and their investments in their esports teams. For starters, it's really great to see that countries are actually supporting esports now. Malaysia is one of those countries that's jumping into the competition with their own initiatives and funding for a lot of their esports teams. The Malaysian government has started investing $4.6 million into the esports ecosystem. The government has unanimously agreed to budget the funds to help support talent development, coaching, infrastructure, and grassroots activities. A small portion of that fund will also go towards developing an esports center. Interestingly, Malaysia is no stranger to esports. They were the host of the PUBG Global Series 1 and are set to host the PUBG Global Championship later this year. Next up, we have Germany that's in the news. So basically, Germany's out there looking for developers to start their own studios. Germany's Minister of State of Culture and Media is inviting German developers to pitch their game ideas and apply to the Press Start Game Startup Grant. This is a major opportunity for those German developers who want to start a studio but don't have the funds. Remember, this is a grant, so that's basically free money that you don't have to pay back like a loan. Now, the starting is about $3,000 and it may not sound a lot, but it's a start. I'll post more information for the Press Start Game Startup Grant for Germany, and I'll also post a link about the investments for Malaysia. Alright, short and sweet for the global checkpoint. And we're going to finish up the news with the game state update. Alright, first up in the game state is Black Ops 6. So first off, are you guys playing Black Ops 6? If you are, there's Dark Ops challenges that were leaked earlier this week. Now, if you don't know, Dark Ops challenges is part of the trophy challenge system, where as you reach that milestone, a new challenge unlocks. If you're one of those people who love to plan out what you're going to chase after, the whole list of challenges are listed on the screen, so you can take a look at that. If you like to be surprised and keep the mystery, skip to the next update. Alright, this next update is for fans of Realm Royale Reforged and Divine Knockout. This is just a kind PSA for those of you who are interested in the game. AntiHero Studios has announced that they will be shutting down the games on February 17th, 2025. As we announced in the previous episode, AntiHero is undergoing a studio-wide reorganization, and unfortunately these two games are on the chopping block. After the 17th, you'll still be able to play the games until the servers go down, which they haven't really told us anything about. We'll try our best to inform you either through our Pulse episodes or through social media, so be sure to follow us there. Last but not least, we have Epic releasing The Fab. The Fab is basically a unified marketplace where it combines all 4 different stores into one single unified app. The 4 apps that are getting combined are essentially all of the apps that Epic owns. That includes Unreal Engine Marketplace, Sketchfab Store, Quixel, and obviously the Epic Games Store. If you want to learn more, head on over to fab.com or fab.com, or you can go to the epicgames.com and you can learn more about the new app there. Alright, and before we round off the news, we want to know more about the types of games and industry news that you guys want to know more about. Is there a game on your radar that you'd like to hear coverage on? Let us know in the comments and we'll add it to our game state so you can stay up to date. Next up, new game releases. Hey, thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Pulse. If you've made it this far and you found this episode informative, please shoot us a like. Want to stay up to date with the latest industry news and updates? Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Thanks again for tuning in. See you all in the next Pulse. See ya.